Hi. So this video is going to be on the structure of human consciousness. So it's going to be on like what's the difference between an enlightened person or an NPC, and what's going on when you dream, what's going on when you have mental imagery, or when you're having like a psychedelic visions, and how is that different from enlightenment or embodiment, things like that. So the surface of the mind is where all the mental imagery comes from, and you can think of this as water, as the surface of water, as the surface of consciousness. The surface of your consciousness is so directly analogous to the behavior and the nature of water that you can use any of your experiences with water as thinking aids or as understanding aids for the nature of your own mind. And so all of your perceptions, all of your thoughts, anything that can possibly happen to you or anything that you can ever possibly perceive is on the surface of your awareness, right? Whenever you have an experience, it meets you at the border of your awareness. And the border of your awareness is basically analogous to the surface of water. And so the whole world and all your ideas and everything else takes place on that surface. In my path or in my development, at some point after I went pretty deep, I stopped dreaming very much, and I never understood why. And also, like, I stopped having mental imagery very much. And so what happens is that if you're fixated on the surface, you have, oh, there's a thought, there's a perception, there's a whatever, and these are wave patterns. If you drop down low, you start to your experience or your perception is you're in this fluidic space that is pure silence, pure consciousness, pure awareness, and thus it's kind of formless, and it's not a thing. So you can't talk about it. I can't share it. I can't do anything with it. That's why people say enlightenment is kind of like useless. It's the stuff under the surface. But what it lets you do is that you start seeing more like, imagine dropping down under the waves, and the deeper you drop down, the more waves you can see all at the same time. Right, like if you're way down under the ocean and you look up, that cone of vision is encompassing more and more surface, right? Whereas if you're at the surface, you're enmeshed in your thoughts, you're enmeshed in your perceptions, you're at the surface, and so you'll be buffeted by emotions, you'll be buffeted by thoughts, perceptions, like when you're existing at the surface of your awareness. And this is what people call a superficial existence. And so if you drop down into silence, if you drop down into being, you are dropping down into the awareness, and then your cone of perception is both, like, it's when you look out, like if you're just looking, it's just awareness, right? What people are chasing, like what you would want, like if you like, let's say you were coming to me for insight, or if you were trying to get money from somebody, you're trying to get prestige or fame or holiness or anything that you're ever going to chase, that's a wave. You're still looking for a phenomenon. You're still looking for an event. You're still looking for something to happen to you. But if you the prize, right, what everyone's chasing with enlightenment is to experience the depth, right? But experiencing the depth has no bearing or no use on the surface, because the surface is all these waves interacting. So while it's the prize, right? It's the prize of spirituality is to fall into or enter the body of God. That's the prize. It has no materialistic bearing. And so I've kind of been bitter about this a while, because it's like I was chasing it and got it, and then it's like, and then I wanted something to happen from it, right? So it's like in my case, I've developed some problems with my relationship to God from like wanting more or wanting something to happen. And that's a little bit like getting the water underneath and then complaining that it's not a wave, right? So you can get enlightenment and if it's not complete, right? Like mine's not complete. There's still a person there, and then there's no result, there's no effect, there's no surface phenomenon to it. But I still, like, I never stopped existing at that depth. And so when I take in waves as well at that depth, at the depth that I'm at, my imagination only sees like massive patterns all at the same time. It's not thoughts, it's not perceptions, it's not memories, it's all of them at once. And so in that sense, it's beyond sensation, it's beyond perception, it's beyond it's just beyond, and it's beyond the same way that, like, you could say at the very surface of your mind, you go, there's a thought, there's a perception, there's an emotion, there's an event at the surface, and then that's what your lexicon is geared around. And then as you drop down lower and lower and lower, you're seeing these patterns that are so big that it's containing all of that stuff. You would say it's beyond it's too big, right? It's too big to talk about. It's too big to give, because if you were to talk about it, it's like this influence that shifts like the whole world or the whole city or the whole event. It's not a wave that'll go in and interact with anything, right? Like the tide comes in, and the tide does not directly interact with any of the smaller waves under it. It just changes their depth. It changes their quality. They're all happening on top of it. So like anything that I would chase as a person is underneath and supported by the waves that I experience, right? The waves that I experience are these big waves, and then they contain all the tiny little phenomenon. And so like when you see me talk or when you see me think, I tend to think in these very broad, sweeping, all-encompassing strokes, and that's from that position of depth, right? And this position of depth that I've stabilized has been from training and practicing at depth in water itself, and then connecting that to my thoughts. And so when I dream or when I whatever, the ideas are so big and so whatever that it could only be described as not. It doesn't exactly happen in the sense of all the smaller waves that like bump into each other. Like my thoughts don't directly interact with reality whatsoever. They are the substrate. Just like the surface doesn't ever directly interact with the water. As you go down deeper, you get these big waves. It's like the difference between a day and a season, right? The season alters the day, but the season and the day never run into each other. The way that like you could in terms of like a cause and effect chain that you could trace. Or it's the difference. Or not even a day and a season. It's almost like the difference between a season and a tree, right? The season will never run into the tree. It kind of goes by under, and the tree is sitting on top of the season. Like it's this large step up in patterns, and that's what happens on the spiritual path or what have you, because it's you're disidentifying with the surface phenomenon, and then you're shifting the identity to that of the being, the presence, the fullness, the actuality, the what is. Like the surface is just an activity. What is the water, and the water is this thing with depth, this thing underneath everything. And so dropping into that depth position has an impact on what you're able to see or what you're able to do. But it doesn't, if you drop too low, it has no connection to the surface. It's kind of, it's in somewhat, it's a disassociated vantage point. Like you could go up in the other direction, but to go up in that upward disassociated direction, it's like it requires constant effort, the same way that like an airplane or a balloon or some elevated perspective requires constant effort to maintain, whereas a deeper perspective drops down under the water, and there's no effort to maintain it. It's already there. And so it's almost like you'd want to dial it in a certain way, like everything's wet, right? So there's no sense in chasing this depth, which is kind of what I got into. Was like, oh, there's the water. I've tasted the water. There's no effect. Like it doesn't help me in the world. So I must need to go deeper. I must need to go deeper. I must need to go deeper. And so, I just went deeper and deeper and deeper, kind of like chasing this thing to where, eventually I'd be like, oh, I'll go so far into the depth that I'll find something that'll rearrange the wave patterns on the surface, and I'll be able to make money, or I'll be able to whatever, have clout, right? To do it professionally, because it's like, oh yeah, that's what I really like doing. And if you ever go, oh, I'm gonna do this well enough that I can do it professionally, I don't think it. I think that's why people say, like, oh yeah, don't try and do that stuff. But it's literal. It's absolutely literal. Like so if you do drugs, or if you just whatever, it tends to have, if you can take a substance and it causes the waves to change, you're changing the surface. It's still a superficial activity. But if you get away from the superficial activity, the practice and the reward has no material bearing, right? Because the prize is the water, and getting the prize changes nothing about the world. But that's just where that's where the perspective comes from. That's where big mind comes from. When people go, oh, he's a deep thinker or something like that, it's from dropping way down and looking and having this cone of vision that's like so far away from the world that you're able to see all the different happenings, all the thoughts, all the memories, all the seasons, all the perceptions all at once. And you go, all of those things are actually this one wave, right? Because it's like the tide is a wave that all the different waves are on top of. You could be looking at the surfers on the beach, and these surfers could be riding 10, 20, 15 waves. All of those waves are events happening on the tide, and all of those tides are waves happening on the season. And all of those seasons are waves happening on the year. And so as you drop down below that, you get this larger and larger and larger view. But at the same time, it's more and more separate from any of the particular waves, because that's like, oh, I'm just a person. So these big thoughts have almost no bearing on that, other than they make you real. Right? They make you embodied. You actually exist. If you're an NPC, it's this perspective, it's this awareness that has no depth to it, no embodiment, and so it's just the network of waves, right? Then that person is just the culture. They're just their environment. They're just their whatever, and all the waves are going there. If you don't have any depth, there's no one there. There's no awareness making any choices, making any decisions, or doing anything interesting. It's only the people with depth. I had a priest who he would say, he was quoting somebody else, but it was like everything has a surface, but not everything has depth. Right, so there's people. Every person has the same surface. Like I have the same surface. Everyone has the same surface, and everyone's surface is as inexorably intermeshed with the rest of the surface. But it's only the people with the depth that start to develop the I, because the I is the water, and then the I is the thing making the choice. Right, and the choice is the thing generating the freedom. And if you don't get caught up in wanting, like, if I wasn't as so dissatisfied with like my job or myself or my relationships at the time when I was doing spiritual practices, then I probably wouldn't have been wanting to get something from it and would have just accepted it. Because like if you're okay when the rest of your life, all you have to do is have somebody tell you, like, observe your thoughts, and like the observation of the thought, you do that just once and boom, where are you observing the thoughts from? You're observing the thoughts from the depth of your awareness. And so then you're free, you're deep, you're one, and that's you're done. Unless you go into that state with craving, with passion, with dissatisfaction, then you'll want something from it, kind of like I did, or do. And then that wanting is like, so you can go to the depth, but then you're just chasing, then you go, okay, there's a big you can basically like drown yourself. Or I mean, it's always been fun for me. I like going deep, right? I like swimming, I like water. I like doing this, like without any reward, really. I don't think I've ever had any payoff, but it's still the only thing that I care about. I would like a payoff. But that desire to have a payoff will also ruin the satisfaction of the reward. Right? So in some sense, you would wanna this is why this stuff is occulted in some sense, is if you go into it with the desire or with the dissatisfaction, you'll bring that dissatisfaction into heaven. So it's almost like you want to be thoroughly satisfied with the world, with your place, like get your job, get your relationship, do your thing, be thoroughly satisfied with the world, or be thoroughly dissatisfied with the world, whatever it is. You want to be wanting nothing from the world before you go for the depth, because the depth is where the only satisfaction lies. But you can bring dissatisfaction into it, and then that will make it so that it's like it's difficult to enjoy. And that's the same as like a rich person, having everything but just also like just having no pleasure in it, right? So you can have everything and have no pleasure in it. But that's what's going on. So like when you dream, you're sinking down into that being, and you're able to look up at the surface. And so that dreaming position for most people is able to see more of the reality as they fall into the unconscious, right? Which the unconscious is actually awareness itself. Right? The conscious mind is just the surface, and what people call the unconscious is the consciousness. And so as you fall unconscious, it's that perspective gives you these big dream images. And so sometimes like the dream images that you're having is like all of your life events is basically a larger wave pattern that you can't see. All you see is this and this and this and this and this until you dream and fall down under it. And then you go, oh, that's this one thing. And that one thing, when you're dreaming, maybe it'll be represented as like a fox or a beaver or a star, or like a threshold of wheat or what have you, the sun and the moon. These you're using those symbols to label or name the larger wave pattern that you saw in your unconscious or in your deeper state. And that's why the dream imagery is different from the waking imagery, is because the dream imagery is the waves encapsulating all the big events. You could go, oh, why did that thing happen? Like, why wasn't it possible for anybody to surf the other day? And it would be, oh, because the tide was out. So you would see in your perceptual life, like, that person didn't catch a wave, that person didn't catch a wave, that person didn't catch a wave, and you'd be like, well, what's going on? Was it, oh, their skill was off, or that wave was wrong, or that wave was wrong? And then we fall into dreaming, you go, oh, the tide was totally out. So like the reef to water ratio wasn't right. And so the waves weren't breaking correctly, but that was all one event, and you would categorize that one event as a cosmic squirrel or something like that. That's where dream imagery comes from. And so everything, like all of this stuff is this realm of interaction. Like what I'm saying is not a metaphor. You are water, and your awareness is water. And so all this is happening on the surface of your awareness, and then all of it is then there's the possibility of going into the depth of your awareness. And these distinctions between the layers of water and these layers of reality, it's almost like a thermocline or whatever. So you can have the ocean and there's a surface there, and if you go down low enough, there's another surface where the salinity changes or where the temperature changes, and you'll have a surface inside the surface. And so as you go down into your body, the surface inside the surfaces would be like the cells. That's a boundary layer, or the DNA, or the atoms, or the surface. These are all different layers. They're separate, but it's these layers that you can go into. And then if you drop through another layer, then the visual imagery is going to change again, which people experience this type of stuff on drugs all the time, but also just going deep or going into silence. As you go deep enough, eventually you'll pass what is the essentially equivalent to like a thermocline or a salinity barrier, right? Which is the difference in the different densities of electromagnetic fields. That's the difference between the air and the grass or the steering wheel, is that there's different densities of electromagnetic fields, and then along that field is a barrier, and it's all awareness. So you can pass through these layers of awareness just fine. And then that's where you'll shift realities. Like when people are doing drugs and they're like in a totally different reality, it's not a totally different reality. It's just a layer. It's just a layer underneath the surface, which, I mean, I guess you could say is another reality, but it's not like you leave it or you don't go there. And that's that. And then like, so if you have like mind blindness, mental whatever, like some people are just so deep that you could look at an NPC as somebody that's like so deep that you can't fathom what they are. And that's what happens when you go, oh, you see the awareness of God in everybody. It's there. It might not be like, if anything, somebody who is shallow or spiritually advanced is in some sense less deep, because their awareness can be fathomed or conceptualized or pointed at or said to be like, oh, there's that. Where if you go, that completely superficial person is the big God, the and so then they would have mind blindness, or sort of where they don't have any they anyway. So that's that. I saw, like, I basically learned how to shift or change my depth consciously, instead of like putting myself into an area and like not waking up. So kind of like spontaneously, I guess, woke up, maybe? Did I have an awakening? Might have had an awakening. no drugs. Weed makes all this very confusing because it makes the silence smoky, cloudy, visible. So like the stuff that is normally not connected to the world, like the water underneath, you start being able to see it, and you would go, oh, I can see it, and so that means there's a connection to it, but it doesn't actually have a connection to it any more than silence has a connection to it. And so that's why stoner stuff has insight and has depth in some circumstances, but it's also there's an illusion of it being connected to the world, just like there's an illusion of, like, silence is fully connected to the world, the water is fully connected to the surface, but the water is never going to be an event on the surface. And so you'll start to see things in the consciousness, in the awareness, with the weed that'll never be an event on the surface. And then if people get into, like, this is why drugs and stuff make people psychotic, because they'll start seeing things in the silence that are actually there, but they're not part of the surface, they're not part of reality. And so you can start to get, like, very, very confused, for lack of a better word. Anyway,